On June 10, 1952, a daughter, Sheila Ann von Wies, was born to Neil Wies and Liz Lenore Allen. The husband was a veteran of World War I, served in the U.S. Air Force, and the wife had a civilian specialty, an accountant at the same company. In addition to Sheila, they had two other children, Bill and Deborah, and the family resided in Minneapolis. Sheila grew up surrounded by love, care, and affluence, and in her youth, many problems bypassed her. The girl studied at school on Good and Excellent, then entered Boston University at the Faculty of Political Science. Here she also graduated from the master's program. Then there was a job in an elite publishing house. Her specialty meant communication with many famous people from around the world, for example, with the politician Ted Kennedy and a number of popular musicians. Sheila built a worthy career, but also simple worldly desires were not alien to her: to marry well, to create a family, to have children. And one day James Mack, a famous conductor, composer, producer, and arranger, appeared on her life path. He was acquainted with many stars, participated in the recording of more than 60 records of different artists, and also headed the music department at Harold Washington College in Chicago. When the man met with Sheila, he already had children from a previous marriage, but they did not prevent him from building a romantic relationship with a new Pasea. The connection developed rapidly, and soon it came to the wedding. Then the newlyweds moved to Oak Park, a small town in Illinois County. The couple loved music and engaged in it at a decent level, even periodically organizing performances on the back patio. It was a show that all the neighbors came to see. They liked the sweet and sympathetic Sheila. In October 1995, realized the second cherished dream of a woman, the birth of a child. At that time, the woman was already 43 years old, but age did not prevent the birth of a healthy baby girl, who was named Lois Heather. Her parents surrounded her with love, later arranged her in the best kindergarten in school, and many relatives thought that the mother spoiled her daughter unnecessarily. In 2001, Sheila and James wanted to have a luxurious vacation and bought a cruise on the Mediterranean Sea. They also took little Heather on the trip. On this vacation, the head of the family severely injured his leg, and the ship's medics were unable to provide proper care. As a result, the victim suffered partial paralysis. The family filed a lawsuit against the ship's firm for damages, but the proceedings continued for more than 9 years. In 2004, another trouble arose. The police showed up at the Mack's house with accusations against Sheila. She allegedly prevented James's children from a previous marriage to contact him. She cut off the electricity and telephone in the house, pretending the absence of the owners. The episode was quite bizarre and was not further developed, nor did it affect Sheila and James's marital union in any way. In the 20th of July in 2006, again the whole family went on a trip, this time to Athens. There James suffered a sharp deterioration of health after a pulmonary embolism. He died in his hotel room. The date of death is documented as August 06, 2006. After his death, James Mack's will was announced, according to which his daughter Heather received $1.5 million. Up until this point, Sheila had an increasingly deteriorating relationship with her daughter. Perhaps Heather's teenage rebelliousness was to blame, but things were worse. The spoiled girl was constantly making scandals and even beat her own mother. In police reports since 2008, there are 35 such acts, for example, in the fracture of Sheila's arm. In addition, the naked daughter repeatedly ran away from home, and her mother filed reports on her disappearance. Friends of the unhappy mother stated that she repeatedly tried to establish a relationship with Heather and visited with her different psychologists. The rebel herself at that time studied in middle school in Oak Park and River Forest. That's where her dancing ability was realized, and there she behaved in a cultured and intelligent manner. But when it came to her relationship with her mother, she exploded. As a high school student, Heather met a young rapper, Tommy Schaefer, with the stage name Tommy Axe. He was 2 years older than her. At that time, the guy had quite a few difficulties with the law due to minor misdemeanors. Examples: crossing the road at a red traffic light, assaulting a Lincoln Park handyman, shoplifting chips and a bottle of beer. Tommy had a lot of buddies, but not best friends, and only his cousin, Robert Biebs, was particularly close. And with Heather, there was only occasional socializing. As you know, because of a leg injury on a cruise, the Mack family filed a lawsuit, and it was satisfied in her favor only in 2011. According to the court's decision, compensation of $340,667 was transferred to Sheila's account, and on the balance of her husband, $500,000. But since the one was no longer alive, according to the criteria of the will, this amount went to the daughter's account. But the judge, for some reason, obliged to transfer this money to the widow. Because of this event, the daughter hated her mother even more and threatened to kill her more than once. In 2013, Sheila even hired a private investigator for fear of realizing these threats. The daughter had been following her mother during this period, studying her routes, schedule, and habits, plotting something terrible. There was hatred, even enmity, between Sheila and Heather. And so it seemed strange that they had traveled together to the coast of Greece. However, nothing fatal happened there. In 2014, Tommy and Heather already met much more often. They had an affair, which was opposed by the girl's mother. The peak moment occurred when the daughter stole her mother's bank card and sponsored a party at the same hotel. Almost all the funds from the balance, more than $1,000, were used up. The mother threatened to report to the police. The daughter scandalized and blamed her for many troubles, including the death of her father. Heather was sure that Sheila had set everything up on purpose to get an impressive inheritance. The tension only increased, and against this background, the girl and her boyfriend began to make plans on how to remove the annoying mother, who was also already 62 years old. She was an obstacle to the receipt of all family finances. An absolutely not logical looked joint trip Sheila and Heather in the summer of 2014 to the island of Bali. That's also where Tommy, who received criminal tips from cousin Robert, secretly traveled to, although the cousin intervened with the obligation of getting his share as well. August 2014, Bali, the 5-star San Regis Hotel. It's a tropical paradise with white sands, crystal clear bodies of water, and lots of palm trees. The mother hoped that in 10 days of staying here, her daughter would come to her senses and stop hating her. But she was deeply mistaken. Already on the day of arrival here, the daughter sent a text message to Tommy that everything is developing as they need, then again stole a credit card from her mother and bought a ticket for the suitor for $12,000 by online method. And the guy arrived on the island 12 hours later. His girlfriend, meanwhile, was in the hotel again fighting with her mother, this time over the news of her pregnancy. Tommy joined the fight. It happened on the night of August 11th. He hit the woman in the face with a metal crowbar, which led to her instant death, and the killer immediately reported it to Robert, cousin. Tommy and Heather packed Sheila's body in a suitcase and asked the baggage handler to place it in the lobby. In the meantime, they called a cab. The cab arrived 10 minutes later. The suitcase with the corpse was stuffed in the trunk. The couple were on their way to the airport to leave Bali quickly. Only the conspirators made fatal mistakes. Sheila, knowing her daughter's habits, warned the hotel staff not to accept payment with her card in Heather's hands. Lacking funds, the couple didn't pay for the room and simply fled. They left their passports in the hotel safe. Without those documents, there's no way to fly. Realizing the miscalculations on the way to the airport, the conspirators asked the cab driver to turn off at the cheap Rizada Wali hotel they had just passed. The suitcase was left in the cab, and the couple asked the driver to wait for 15 minutes while they checked in here. 2 hours passed. The chauffeur couldn't stand it and went into this hotel himself. At his request, they checked the couple's room, empty. Bonnie and Clyde had just checked in here and ran right out. The annoyed cab driver then checked the suitcase, from which a red liquid was oozing. Suspecting something wrong, he called the police. The officers arrived and opened the luggage and discovered Sheila's dead body. Later, forensic experts figured out the cause of death, a fracture of the facial bones, due to which the airflow to the lungs was blocked. The victim also had broken fingers on her hands and bruises on her wrists. The terrible news reached Sheila's relatives, and her sister Deborah immediately began to monitor the internet for materials about the case and found only a photo of that suitcase. Information about the murder hit the press. There was an outcry. Employees of the hotel Rizat Valley informed the investigation that night a strange young couple came to them without bags. The guy asked for a special voucher to use a computer with internet. To do this, the employee asked him to provide his full name. Allegedly, the service is not provided without it. Soon these data were also received by the police. However, it was not necessary to organize complex search operations. The first thing the police went to the room issued to such strange guests. Hotel employees said that the room had already been inspected and should be empty. However, the conspirators secretly returned to it, as they had nowhere else to go and were terribly tired. It was there that the police found them sleeping. The suspects were taken to the station for questioning. They told lies about some gang that attacked them at the San Regis Hotel, and that it was those gangsters who killed Sheila, and the sweet couple managed to escape. Such testimony was totally at variance with the stories of the hotel staff and the cab driver, and the conspirators were arrested on suspicion of murder. Heather threw a tantrum, screamed that she was innocent, and demanded a lawyer from the United States. The perpetrators were shown on public television in Indonesia. The report was filmed from a police station. Tommy was covering his face with a t-shirt, while Heather was smiling and smoking. The couple was later transferred to La Paz Denpasar prison, which held hardened criminals and murderers. There, Bonnie and Clyde several times changed the version of what happened, because the local laws for premeditated murder was supposed to be shot. Meanwhile, Sheila's body was taken to her homeland for a proper burial. At the ceremony, her close friend Elliot made a speech, praising the woman for her good deeds and the development of art. The public was extremely outraged by such an egregious event, and the case gained worldwide publicity. During the proceedings, Heather was repeatedly sent for psychiatric evaluation. Data about her past visits to psychologists were not disclosed and were not taken into account in reaching a verdict. Gradually, the police learned more and more details about the case, and the press got wind of the suspect's pregnancy. And while in custody, she gave birth. It happened on March 17, 2015. A baby girl was born, named Stella. The authorities did not prohibit the young prisoner to see the child, but only in prison. The baby felt well. Only on her left hand there was an anomaly in the form of 6 fingers. An operation to amputate the extra finger was required. Her daughter was kept in a special hospital, and about a week after her birth, a trial was held. At the hearing, her parents appeared as newlyweds, even though they were not married. They wore plastic rings to signify the symbolic union. Heather's was red and Tommy's was blue. At the meeting, the guy cried, claimed that he was defending himself from an aggressive Sheila, allegedly the one who attacked him after learning about his daughter's pregnancy. He went on to say that his date had constantly confessed to wanting to get rid of the annoying mother. Heather's testimony turned out to contradict Tommy's words. The girl still denied the accusations, admitted that she never wished her mother dead, and during the tragic scuffle, she ran to the bathroom. Her only offense was helping her boyfriend dispose of the body. The prosecutors did not believe the defendants and presented the judge with facts proving the criminal designs of the young conspirators, such as the testimony of witnesses who heard Heather once suggesting that her boyfriend hire an assassin to eliminate Sheila, and had already prepared $40,000 to do so. Forensic photos of the victim. The photos clearly show wounds and bruises on her arms and severe cuts on the dead woman's face. This is evidence of her attempted self-defense. The defendants did get a verdict of premeditated murder. It was handed down by a 3-judge panel, and Indonesian law gave the couple the death penalty, but the court relented and reduced the verdict to 20 years in prison. The reasons for this were Heather's newborn baby and the desperate remorse of the criminals. Only then did Tommy realize what he had done. And a little later, Sheila's family came to him in prison to look into his eyes and express their pain. The guy sank into depression, hated himself, and sincerely repented every day. Because of nervous exhaustion, his teeth began to rot, and under his eyes formed terrible black bags. He lost 11 pounds of weight and became as pale as a vampire. In April 2015, a final hearing was held, and the judge handed down final verdicts: 10 years in prison for Heather and 18 years in prison for Tommy. The prosecution called the offenders ruthless and bloodthirsty, but Tommy's exemplary behavior and remorse saved him from a longer sentence, and the boy took the blame, and his sweetheart was in high spirits. Leaving the courtroom, posing for photographers from various newspapers, then drinking soda, according to her, with a smell of alcohol, smiled and joked. Only one fact upset her: she would be released much earlier than her boyfriend. At that point, however, Tommy already looked at her with hatred and wanted nothing to do with her. Their relationship was over, and their daughter, according to local laws, could be with her mother only until she reached the age of 2. Heather, after avoiding the death penalty and receiving a light sentence, engaged in defiant behavior while incarcerated, such as taking lots of photos and videos with her prison friends, partied with them, getting alcohol somewhere and getting very drunk. The money for these drinks came from selling food in the prison yard. The prison authorities allowed her to make such sales, showing pity for her as a single mother. She paid little attention to her daughter, who spent the first years of her life in nightmarish conditions. Tommy treated Heather as a fallen woman, calling her mentally ill. One day, reporters secretly broke into the prison and filmed Heather's fun and dancing in the cell with her friends. And the footage soon made its way onto TV and the internet and caused a lot of public outrage. Tommy wrote a petition to the U.S. government asking that Heather be released from the Indonesian prison and placed in an American psychiatric hospital. At the end of the appeal, admitted that he did not need sympathy and hoped that their daughter would become a decent person. Another year later, the guy wrote a 6-page letter to his friends in which he made shocking revelations. How Sheila's murder was planned and executed, Heather's debauchery in prison in front of her young daughter. Heather seeks to maximize her profits at the expense of baby Stella. The prisoner changed for the better and tried to blot out his sins with daily visits to the prison church and helping to build a chapel.
2 years had passed, local laws had not changed, and 2-year-old Stella could no longer be with her mother. So Heather looked for guardians for the little girl. In the end, the choice fell on a cellmate who had already been released, Osher Putu Melody Swart. The woman quickly settled in Indonesia and married a local wealthy man. Stella was handed over to this married couple. In addition, Heather officially renounced the rights to Sheila's property and gave them to her young daughter, who did not yet realize that she was becoming the sole heiress of an impressive fortune.
It was the same Robert, Tommy's cousin. The police identified his connection to the crime. He was quickly arrested, and his trial took place in 2017. The suspect pleaded guilty to breaking the law, inspired the murder of a U.S. citizen abroad. A sentence of 20 years loomed before him. In the process of the trial, he admitted that then, in August 2014, Tommy asked him for criminal advice, how best to arrange the murder. Afterwards, Robert fell into a depressive state. He did not recognize the atrocity from the past and could not believe that Tommy and Heather would dare to commit such a gruesome crime in reality. The judge emphasized that such counseling was illegal and announced the verdict. The verdict was based on the absence of any criminal record and other mitigating factors. As a result, Robert went to serve only a 9-year prison sentence. The relatives of the murdered woman were satisfied with the verdict.
Sitting in jail, Heather went on a spree. In addition to filming dances and perversions, she added new material. This time it turned out to be a picture of revelations. In the video, the girl admitted that she had long dreamed of her mother's death and fulfilled this dream herself. However, the lawyers worked quickly and removed this video from the social network, explaining that Tommy forced their client to take such a step. It was October 2021. Heather had served 7 years in an Indonesian prison and was out on parole. The first thing she did when she was free was to meet Stella, her 6-year-old daughter. The girl lived in Indonesia for another month, and then she was extradited to the U.S. with the child. At that point, the daughter no longer needed a guardian. However, on arrival in Chicago, Heather was taken by FBI representatives right at the airport. This time, she was charged with conspiracy to deprive life in another country and obstruction of justice. The girl then tried to attract media attention to her arrest, considering it illegal. After all, she had already served her time in Indonesia, and it was unreasonable for the authorities to bring new charges against her in the United States. While the investigation was going on in the States, Stella had a new guardian, lawyer Vanessa Fabia. A few months later, however, Osher flew to Chicago and reclaimed custody. Deborah and Bill, Sheila's sister and brother, were not ready to take care of the child and agreed that the girl stayed with Osher and her husband because they guaranteed comfortable and safe conditions. As for Heather, at her first court hearing in the U.S., she denied all charges. Her lawyer, Kid S.P. Vogel, based his line on possible bail. Only it took a long time for that to happen. District Judge Charles Nargle accepted the plea and heard from the assistant prosecutor Terry Keeney as well. A reasonable time was necessary for a trial verdict. The prosecutor's office set out to obtain medical and psychiatric reports of the defendant's examination. These materials could help detail Sheila's alleged massacre. The prosecutors were building tactics that would prove that Heather was a danger to society. Elliot also spoke in court, calling in memory of his friend to free Stella from the vicious environment in which the girl had lived since birth. The man suggested building a child protection algorithm similar to the witness protection program. In this way, Stella will receive proper upbringing and full development. For this, she needs a two-parent family with the necessary resources, legitimate earnings, and specialties. About a week later, Heather made a deal with investigators, pleading guilty to conspiracy to take the life of a U.S. citizen abroad. A little later, a hearing was held in federal court in Illinois. District Judge Matthew Kelly, taking into account the recommendations of the prosecution to give the guilty party 28 years in prison minus 7 years served in Indonesia, said that he himself could make adjustments to the sentence. The court was also deciding who to appoint as guardian for Stella, since Osher left the U.S. in November 2022. Judge Stephanie Miller worked on the case and found the best solution was to give the girl temporary custody to Lisa Hellman. This woman was Heather's cousin on her mother's side. In February 2023, the same judge consolidated her decision, explaining that the temporary measure was necessary to make sure that Stella was not taken advantage of. Heather's lawyer, Michael Leonard, was unable to influence the judge's verdict. On top of that, Tommy's mother suddenly spoke up about her custody rights. Being Stella's grandmother, she wanted to keep her granddaughter with her. In January 2024, the final hearing in the Heather Mack case took place. Bill, her uncle, testified first. He insisted on the maximum possible term for his niece, as she never repented of her crime. At that moment, Heather herself, dressed in a prisoner's jumpsuit, orange color, shoes without laces and dark glasses, looked around at everyone in the audience and smiled strangely. But her smiles faded when Judge Matthew Kelly announced the sentence for the defendant. 26 years in a U.S. prison, plus $22,708 in compensation, and a $50,000 fine. The lawyers were outraged. Their client bowed her head, realizing that all her youth would be spent in detention. Elliot noted the grim irony after the meeting. His friend had dreamed of a child, and as a result had given birth to her executioner. Sometime later, Stella learned all the details of her grandmother's murder and renounced all ties with Heather and Tommy.